You thought I was going to be in the bathroom for this game, didn't you? That's what you were thinking. But no, Nebraska wins the game. It was never in doubt. 38-27, moved to 4-1 on this season. I laughed a lot during this game, and it was more of a maniacal, nearly a breakdown kind of a laugh, because this was one of the shittiest games I've ever seen in my life. In the first half, Nebraska lost more yardage to tackles for loss and sacks than they actually had in offense. And at the beginning of this game, it looked like Nebraska was going to beat the holy hell out of Michigan State. I mean, you had that nice, scoring drive down the field, and on the, the punt block that was so fantastic that it looked like we could almost intercepted the snap and run it into the end zone. And then after that, everything went to shit. It really did. I do think that the wind plays a big factor in this game. If you remember last year, we had a game against Rutgers, 14-7. It was really kind of a nasty day. Okay, what do we got? Total yardage, we ended up not terrible. 261 total yards, 194 pass yards, 67 rushing. I know people are going to be going insane. Listen, I think all of social media, and I'm sure that if you were watching this game with a group of friends, that they all did this. And it's one thing that drives me absolute batshit insane. When we're having our game threads and people start doing this stuff where they project the rest of the year, like we're never going to win another game, we're not going to go to a bowl, we're going to end up 4-7. That stuff drives me insane. And the reason why it drives me insane is because we're not going to play like murderers row. Penn State lost to UCLA today. Penn State, number 7. And UCLA didn't have a head coach, offensive coordinator, or defensive coordinator. So you don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the season. So all the gloom and doom stuff is just, it's toxic, and it's kind of waste of energy. On the other hand, and I did some of that. I mean, I did scream at Dylan Raiola. I thought it was time to take him out of the game when he threw that interception. And I'd really like to know, I'd really honestly like to sit down and do an interview with a bunch of coaches and get their opinions on how they handle their quarterbacks, because that wasn't just us. I mean, Michigan State, that Aiden Child, he got the shit beat out of him. And you could tell at the end of the game, he was pretty beat up and wanted to take himself out of the game, could barely move. And yet they kept him in the game. And then they bring in their backup quarterback who scored the early touchdown and then went on a drive late in the game to bring it within, what, 11? And at what point do you just look at it and go, you know what, we're gonna look at this and we're gonna go, you don't fit in this situation, we're gonna pull you out of the game for a little while and get you settled down, and we're gonna let this other guy roll in there. Why in the hell they don't do that more often, I have no idea. I always liked the way Steve Spurrier handled his quarterbacks. They made a bad play, he would take them off the field, tear their head completely off their body, glue it back on, and send them back in 3 or 4 plays. And apparently, the quarterbacks in the psyche are so fragile, we can't break their confidence. Honestly, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of talk about Dylan Raiola in this game. He did not play for a long stretch of time. A lot of that is because of his offensive line. Obviously, would we give up 5 sacks? We got 4 sacks. We gave up 7 TFL tackles for loss for 52 yards lost. And we had, our defense played very, very well. I don't think they gave up, you gave up, 27 points, which is about probably good enough to win most games. 12 tackles for loss for 60 yards and 4 sacks. He beat the hell out of their quarterback, and he made him make some mistakes too. They had 3 turnovers. We had 1. Unfortunately, we did get points off their turnover. They didn't get any off ours. We can't run the ball for shit. We all know that. And I'm sure there's just going to be a lot of comments about, if we can't run the ball, well, we won't win games. Well, honestly, if we can do enough running of the ball, which we did toward the end of this game, to make people respect the run, we can probably win. Well, 9-3, 10-2 are still in sight. I have no idea what's going to happen with Penn State, because that's got to blow their whole psyche out of the water. I mean, that's got to damage them. It's going to be really difficult to recover from that. Texas lost too to Florida. That was kind of fun. And Iowa State got really early on, got the crap beat out of them by Cincinnati. The team that we barely beat earlier, and everybody thought it was just so horrible. I'm not trying to mitigate the fact that our football team has problems, because they have definite problems. They have offensive line problems, and we have problems running the ball. I don't think we have problems with physicality as much as probably people are going to talk about. And I'm sure that, social media, commentating, all that stuff is going to be flipping out this week, and it'll be interesting to see what everybody says. The defense, I thought, was very physical. I can't really think of anything wrong, really horrible, the defense did badly, other than the giving up the first touchdown and giving up the fourth downs, and then giving up the penalties that gave them what was it, 3 first downs on third downs because of defensive holding and stuff like that. The officiating, well, it was shit again. You can't drive a quarterback back and his helmet comes off and it just magically comes off. Helmets don't just magically freaking come off, people. The guy pulled his face mask and pulled his freaking helmet off. And how you miss that call, because it's a very dangerous play, I have no idea. So that's ridiculous. It's a win. Isn't it? It's a pretty fucking ugly win, but it's a win. And you know what? Given our history of playing Michigan State within 5 points or whatever it is in the Big Ten, it's an 11-point win where we scored 38 points pretty much. And then we had a couple touchdowns taken off the field. Our special teams has improved to the point that I think you saw today that they can win games. It was unfortunately Barney had that absolutely gorgeous thoughts of he shook him loose from his shoes in my head touchdown return that was called back on a block in the back. What was the other penalty we had? It was really egregious. We had the other play was it was a forward pass and not a lateral. It looked like we'd scored that one. They made the correct calls on both of those, unfortunately. Now that I've gotten through all of that, I'm sure everybody's going to have negative thoughts on the season. I do think Nebraska has a massive, enormous, huge problem. And that is the problem that there's probably too many Raiolas on our football team. And I'll probably get in trouble for this, but our offensive line is well, it's not good. Elijah Pritchett started just about the right time for it to be extremely critical and cost us a game again. Our offensive line isn't good. It doesn't look very good. Sometimes they can go on drives or series where they perform pretty well, but most of the time they don't look. What do we do? We rushed for 2.2 average yards per rush. That's not an offensive line you want if you're going to be a really good winning football team, is it? We have problems with short yardage stuff. We got down to the red zone and we were like, oh God, what are we going to do here to get a touchdown? And it's a mystery. And last year during the bye week when Marcus Satterfield was fired, I did that video where I said, what do you do well? What are your bread and butter plays? And I'd like to ask you that. I'm not going to comment on it. If you watch this far in the comments, let me know what you think our bread and butter plays are for Nebraska and what's our bread and butter play in the end zone. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. But I think you know where I'm going. Our offensive line doesn't seem to improve that much. Whose fault is that? Well, our offensive line under Scott Frost wasn't that good either. And there is one guy that's carried over, and that's Dylan Raiola, the uncle. And I think really, not right now, but I do think in the future, Matt, the best coaches make changes. And you are going to have to make a choice. If Dylan Raiola leaves and Dylan Raiola leaves, well, so fucking be it. and we don't get Dylan Raiola for a recruit, you got to make those decisions, because right now your offensive line is probably going to cost you at least another game or two this season. If you're brilliant, and I know people will bitch about Dana Holgerson, but I think he's honestly a brilliant guy, and he will come up with plays to work past the shortcomings we have. He did in this game. There was a beautiful screenplay that we scored on, a long touchdown that was well executed, well called, all that stuff. But at some point, you got to make a decision, and that's what the head coach's job is. And I don't see in any way, shape, or form, unless there's something serious going to happen, how this team changes its performance on the offensive line, that Donovan Raiola sticks with this team for another years. And then, like I said, if that means Dylan goes away, well, fuck, whatever. Then that's the choice you got to make. That's what you get for being the head guy. I talked to Matt Rule, in case you thought I was talking to you sitting there on the couch. But I just, you want to be a college football playoff team? Because that's what I think we want. I think you're going to have to make those choices. You're going to have to figure out what the fuck's going on with the offensive line. Because they're still stunting, and they're still not picking up that stuff most of the time, it looks like. And that's enough for now. I don't know what else to say out of this game other than just don't be angry about it. It's a win, and we can just never mention this again and move on with our lives. How about that? What do we got next? Oh, we got Maryland next. There was a lot of interesting games today. Michigan, I said I was not. Wisconsin played Michigan for a while, and then they just kind of folded late. Penn State, UCLA is just going to be a shock. I have a very close work colleague, and I wonder if he smashed his house. Oof. You know what? We're not them today. Might be next week, but for right now, be thankful to them. I love you all. Thank you for the support. Go Big Red. It's a win. Take care of yourselves.